What is the relative position of the actors involved in global politics? The major schools of thought in American international relations predict different answers to this question, with two of them, realism, as exemplified by authors such as Waltz and Morgenthau, and liberal institutionalism, as exemplified by Keohane and Nye, answering the question by definition. But is that really the case? More recent theoretical developments, such as contributions by Rosenau and Cox, emphasize the shifting nature of governance. It is no longer only the province of states, their creations, or their domestic civil society. Governance at the global level may therefore be the work of many different kinds of actors. To find answers, this dissertation maps transnational cooperation to provide security to global governance problems through the use of network analysis. Network analysis is a promising methodology because it allows comparisons of the types of contours of structures and gaps that characterize international reactions to global problems. It provides a way to systematically study the structural properties of networks, as well as the location and characteristics of actors within them. It uses mathematical representation in order to quantify empirical data and to model relations and structures and represent the results graphically. It begins by outlining the context of contemporary globalization, the drivers of global security governance. It examines how the global governance of both human and traditional security has been affected by the neoliberal economics of the Washington Consensus. There are clear markers of this transformative, deinstitutionalizing change, including the privatization of the provision of security and the public assumption of risk, creating what Antonio Gramsci termed an historical block. This has implications for theory building as well as policymaking. Security is no longer a matter only for states, but a subject of global governance, requiring the cooperation of many actors. Cooperation for global security governance, or security networks, can be categorized according to the type of security they provide. However, usually the frames are presented in the security literature as dichotomous, either human or traditional. These are actually points on a spectrum, depending on the situational frame. You can tell what frame you're in by answering these questions. Security for whom? From what? How severe is the threat? How fast does the threat move? This dissertation proposes defining security along these four axes: source of threat, target, speed, and impact. The first case study maps the construction of a traditional security transnational cooperative response network using the response to nuclear proliferation since the end of the Cold War. The second case study uses the methods of social network analysis to discover the structural patterns of cooperation that arose in global response to a human security problem, the Indian Ocean tsunami. The ontology and epistemology of using quantitative network analysis to study global governance are defined, as the definitions and conceptions of what is to be studied are affected by the choice of a formal mathematical approach. I use Barnett and Duval's measures of power, of which there are two core dimensions: the kinds of social relations through which power works, and the specificity of the social relations through which power's effects are produced. Compulsory power is direct control of one actor over another, and is demonstrated by relations of regulation, contract, and conflict. Institutional power is control at a distance, and the typical relationship is membership or attendance. Structural power depends on actor capabilities, which depends on the actor's position in the network. Finally, productive power is the creation of self through discourse or interaction over time. The relations studied in this dissertation are compulsory and institutional power, which together allow conclusions to be drawn about structural power. These are tested on hypotheses on the two big questions of network analysis: who are the most important actors, relations of hierarchy, and are there groups of similar actors, are there non-obvious relationships? The network response to nuclear proliferation maps the construction of a traditional security network using the response to nuclear proliferation. Data for the institutional power relation network comes from selected international treaties and agreements: the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, the G6, the International Atomic Energy Association, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the various proliferation security initiatives, the Agency for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, OPANAL, the Antarctic Treaty, the Bangkok, Palindaba, and Rarotonga treaties, and the Zenger Committee. This network looks even more dramatic in 3D. Taiwan is completely disconnected. The nuclear powers are in pink. Note the loose position of North Korea, India, Pakistan, and Israel. There are several promising aspects to the Non-Proliferation Treaties network. First, most states, even those that do not belong to the major treaties with their attendant strengthened enforcement, belong to at least one regional treaty that has as its goal non-proliferation. Second, most states belong to at least one of the major treaties. But there are also several equally unpromising aspects. There are nuclear weapons states, North Korea, India, Israel, and Pakistan, which do not belong to any major treaties, and there is a state, Taiwan, that is fully capable of developing nuclear weapons and is not party to any treaty at all. In the compulsory power relation network for this case, the data came from contracts mined from Business Source Premier in the period after the Cold War, from 1989 to 2009. These contracts covered construction, operation, and decommissioning of nuclear plants and equipment, processing, enrichment, and other supply of nuclear materials, decontamination, and transportation of spent fuel or waste. The color refers to the different organization types, the arrowheads to the direction of the contract, a contract being between a buyer and receiver of goods or services. The thickness of the tie refers to the number of contracts between those two actors, and the circles indicate that the actor is a member of the World Nuclear Association, while the squares indicate that the actor is not a member. The WNA is a global nuclear energy industry professional organization that has a commitment to non-proliferation in its Charter of Ethics. Actors can become members of the WNA only by a majority vote of the membership, making it more likely that actors who do not demonstrate commitment to this principle will be accepted. In 3D, the clustering in the nuclear contracts network becomes more apparent. The two big clusters are U.S. contracts for cleaning up specific sites in the former Soviet Union and the Chernobyl Shelter Project. This network is not dense, and the density shown is somewhat misleading because the network's data spans 20 years, so not every tie would have been active the entire time. The structure of the Tsunami Response Network uses the methods of network analysis to discover the structural patterns of cooperation that arose in global response to a human security problem. For this case's institutional power relation network, the data source was the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The OCHA situation reports from December 2004 through April 2005 record cooperation among organizations to provide aid. The cut points in the network, and the actors who control the flow of resources or information from one component to the next, are the UN, the World Health Organization, Maldives, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. These backbone actors were able to incorporate new actors when they came on the scene. Thousands of individuals spontaneously created relief groups whose action needed to be directed usefully. The clusters are easier to see in this network in 3D. The two big clusters are big meetings of aid organizations. This institutional network is dense, and the UN is in the center. Partly this is because this data is from the UN, but it still shows what an important role the organization plays in coordinating aid. This case's compulsory power relation network used data from the UN's Financial Tracking Service, which measures commitments and contributions. Color in this network corresponds to organization types. The arrowheads indicate the direction of the contract, and the length of arrow indicates the amount of the transaction, where longer is more. Aggregators collected money from all over the world and gave it to the channels which spent it in the region. Organization type was not an a priori predictor of the role that the organization played in this network. A different way of depicting this, which shows the group clearly, is with a hierarchically clustered dendrogram. The dark areas are actually actors that are extremely closely clustered, a very clear indication of grouping. This grouping emerged spontaneously. It was not the result of top-down direction. You can also see the two main clusters of aggregators and channels in this 3D visualization. The most money came from the white dot, individual donations from private individuals, and the biggest recipients were the pink dots, World Vision and the International Federation of the Red Cross Red Crescent. Roles could not be predicted by actor attributes in this network, where different types of actors played structurally similar roles. Network Strategies for Global Governance compares the results of the different case studies. As we have seen, network analysis allows the simultaneous consideration of multiple relationships, a major insight for the analysis of international relations, even when considering states, let alone the multiple types of actors and layers of relationships that characterize contemporary global governance. Cut points, as seen earlier, and centrality are important for determining micro-level strategies, for network as structures that constrain and enable actors. This table shows the actors in each network with the highest centrality scores. Degree centrality for transnational aid flows is divided into out degree on top for aid donors and in degree on bottom for aid recipients. There can be important differences in which actors are most central according to the measure used, which is why it is recommended to look at more than one measure. Closeness centrality indicates the shortest path to all other actors, while degree centrality is the number of direct connections an actor has. One thing that becomes clear, however, is that non-state actors can be as or more important to the structure and functioning of the network than state actors. For the network as actor macro-level strategies, density is a key measure to consider. As shown in the table, density is higher in traditional security networks than in human security networks. This is likely a reflection of flexibility and ease of making and breaking ties in human security networks. However, it also indicates that the speed at which information diffuses among the actors is relatively quicker in the traditional security networks, and the extent to which actors in those networks have levels of social constraint is higher than in human security networks. Density is also higher in the institutional power relations than in the compulsory power relations of both human and traditional security networks, demonstrating that making ties in order to share information and expertise, as well as enforcement, generally involves more than bilateral ties. Information diffusion is maximized when there are more actors in the network. The intersection depicts the actors that are present in all four networks. They are not necessarily connected to each other, so they don't constitute a network in themselves. The actors in the intersection are all states, with most of the usual suspects in global security present, Western European and North American highly developed nations. But there are also some unexpected actors, Japan and India, for example. Also, there are some notable absences, China, Russia, and Brazil. The actors in the intersection are agenda setters, and do not include any non-state actors, which corresponds with realist projections of the primacy of states. However, because they are not excluded by definition, it is possible that examination of other networks, or the same networks at other times, could turn up more participation by this select group. Intersectionality can thus be used in creating an actor profile, as well as in formulating questions asked of multiple networks. These results, taken together, suggest a framework for using social network analysis in order to move toward a qualitative middle-range theory of global governance with two major assumptions. First, by becoming expert in both issue area and/or the process of cooperation itself, it is possible for an actor to hold an influential hierarchical position in global politics that does not necessarily depend on material capabilities or sovereign status. And second, that non-obvious relationships among actors allow for the flow of resources and ideas, but also create exploitable gaps in security infrastructure and doctrine.